Hello guys, today we will be discussing chemical reactions to answer the question, what is a chemical reaction? A chemical reaction takes place when one or more substances turn into new and completely different substances than they were prior to the reaction. This takes place through the breaking of chemical bonds, the rearrangement of the atoms in the reactant molecules, and the formation of new bonds. This creates a new substance, which again is completely different from the substance or substances that were present before the reaction. Here we can see a few modeled examples of simple chemical reactions. In each, you can see that the starting substances have rearranged and become either a new substance or multiple substances that are completely different than they were prior to the reaction taking place. A chemical reaction, as we've just stated, takes place when the chemical bonds between atoms in what we call the reactant compounds are broken. They then form into the new or different substances, which we call the product compounds. The reactants are the starting substances. Sometimes we could say the old substances. The bonds of the reactant substances are broken apart as the substances react with one another. If we look at our example here, we can see that we have two different reactants here. We have a couple of hydrogen molecules, and we also have an oxygen molecule. Again, these are the old substances that are present before the reaction, and these are what we call the reactants. What takes place in the reaction is that the bonds between the reactant compounds are actually broken apart. These atoms are then rearranged and new bonds are formed. In our example here, we can see that these molecules rearrange into water molecules, which look like this. These substances, which are created through the reaction, the new substances or the substances that are present after the reaction has taken place, are what we call the products. These are the substances that are created through the reaction. Since we know that the products in a chemical reaction are completely different than the reactant products that were available, in any chemical reaction, these product compounds are completely different than the reactant compounds that were present before the reaction took place. For this reason, we know that the properties of these product compounds are completely different than those of the reactants. We know that properties are like a substance's fingerprint. So if it is a new substance, it cannot have the same set of properties as the old substance or a substance that is different. For this reason, we can use properties as a way of determining if a chemical reaction has taken place. If there has been a change in any substance's properties over the course of the interaction, we know that a chemical reaction has taken place. This change in property tells us that a new substance has been formed, which then leads us to know that a chemical reaction has taken place. Although this analysis of properties is the only surefire way to determine if a chemical reaction has taken place, there are several signs that a chemical reaction is very likely to have occurred. These are a color change, a change in temperature. This could either be an increase or a decrease. The creation of a gas. This can be observed either through a visible gas being formed, or oftentimes in liquid, what we will see is the formation of bubbles. The formation of a precipitate, which is a solid forming out of a liquid, or the production of an odor. This can either be a bad odor or a good odor. Any smell that is produced gives us a pretty good sign that a chemical reaction has taken place. Now let's discuss the reaction that you all carried out in your Is It a Chemical Reaction lab. The elephant toothpaste reaction is indeed a chemical reaction. So if you made that prediction, you were completely correct. In that reaction, hydrogen peroxide is the sole reactant in the reaction. Its bonds are broken apart through the reaction with the help of the yeast. The products in that reaction are water and oxygen. The oxygen bubbles end up filling up the soap bubbles, which is what creates that large explosion type toothpaste looking reaction. Some evidence that we see there that a chemical reaction has taken place, is that the temperature increases through that reaction. We also see the formation of a gas, which again is what gives us that really big visible reaction. If we were then to go and test the reactants versus the products and compare their properties, we would find that the new products created, the water and the oxygen, have a completely different set of properties than the hydrogen peroxide, which we started with. That is our evidence that a chemical reaction has indeed taken place in the elephant toothpaste reaction.